Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shelly. I'm the owner and creator of the Vintage Hen and Chick, and a very special welcome if you're new. In today's video, I have 3 projects for you. They are all holiday or Christmas themed, and they are all trash to treasure thrift flips. So if that's something that you're interested in, stick around. For project number 1, I have this wall pocket that I picked up at the thrift store. I see these all the time when I'm out thrifting. So if you see these, pick them up because they're so fun to make over and you can do so many things with it. So I'm going to start out by giving the wall pocket 2 coats of Dixie Belle silk paint in the color Elderflower. Now the Dixie Belle silk paint line is a 3-in-1 paint. So it has a primer, the paint, and a top coat. So anytime you're using the silk paint, you do not have to seal it if you don't want to. So I applied 2 coats of the elderflower and let it dry completely. And now I'm going to apply a transfer, and I'm going to be using some transfers from the IOD Santa's Hollow transfer set. And one thing with the silk paint, because it has a built-in top coat, you don't need to seal it before you apply your transfers. I've already pre-cut out the transfers that I'm going to use for this wall pocket, and I'm going to start applying them to the front. So I'm just going to position my transfer where I want it on my wall pocket, lay it down. There is a tacky surface on the back side of the transfers that will help hold it in place as you're applying it. And then I'm going to rub over the transfer with my transfer tool. Once I get that transfer applied, then I'll start peeling up the transfer and work from one side to the next until my transfer is completely attached to my wall pocket. And then once it's attached, I'll use my transfer sheet to burnish that transfer in, because you want to make sure that your transfers are nice and adhered to your projects. There's a lot of great detail on this wall pocket, and so I'm just going to take a piece of 220 grit sandpaper and I'm going to distress that detail. Anywhere that there's a raised edge or a raised detail piece on the wall pocket, I'm just going to distress it lightly and bring some of that metal back to show through. Now, this is totally optional. You don't have to distress your wall pockets. It's just something that I prefer to do. And I'm also going to distress my transfer just a little bit because I want to give this wall pocket that vintage and antique look. So technically, because I painted the wall pocket with the silk paint and it has a built-in top coat, I don't need to seal it. However, I do need to seal the transfer. And so I'm going to be using my Sweet Pickins Dark Beeswax over the entire wall pocket. I love the look that this beeswax gives projects, especially something in this nice creamy white color. And so I'm going to apply the beeswax over the entire wall pocket, and I'm working in sections. I'll apply some beeswax in a section and then buff it back. And so I'll just apply it over the entire wall pocket, and I love that it gives it a nice vintage antique look. I really like the way this wall pocket turned out. And what I especially like is the transfer on here is not necessarily Christmas or holiday themed. It's something that could be left out all winter long. There's so many ways to style this wall pocket. Let me know in the comments which way you'd style it. For project number 2, I'm going to upcycle these little silver plates that I picked up at a garage sale. I did check them with my Google Lens and they are not worth any money. There's no value to them. They are just silver plated. So I'm going to start out by giving each of the plates 2 coats of Dixie Belle silk paint in the color truffle. And as you can see, when I'm putting that first coat on, it looks a little bit thin and see-through, but don't worry, the silk paint is beautiful for projects like this. Once you get your second coat on, it's going to really grab onto that first coat and you're going to have beautiful coverage. So I'm going to give all 3 of the plates 2 coats of the truffle. I gave all 3 of my plates 2 coats of the truffle and they are dry now. And now I'm going to take my Dixie Belle silk in the color elderflower and I'm going to paint just the inside circle of each of the plates. I'm going to be decoupaging there, and this is why I'm putting the elderflower in the inside circle of the plate. Anytime that you do decoupage or rice paper on a project, having a light paint underneath your decoupage or rice paper is really going to make that image stand out or pop. And so I'm going to do 2 coats of the elderflower on the inside circle of each of the plates. So now that my paint is all dry, it's time to decoupage my rice paper on each plate. And I'm using some Holiday Holly rice paper. And I'm just gonna lay my rice paper down on each plate and then score around the inside circle, which is where I'm gonna be decoupaging this rice paper on. And scoring it is just gonna give me a nice outline of where I need to cut my rice paper so it fits perfectly inside that circle. And so I'm going to score a piece of rice paper for each of the plates, and then we'll get that decoupaged on. For this project, I decided to use my Dixie Belle Gator Hide to decoupage my rice paper on. And the reason I chose the Gator Hide is because the Gator Hide is the strongest and toughest and most durable top coat that Dixie Belle makes. It's also water repellent. And I thought if somebody wanted to use these cute little plates as a coaster, it would be a good idea to have something that's water repellent. And so I just applied a layer of the gator hide to the inside circle of the plate. I misted my rice paper with my mister bottle, and then I just laid it down. And now I'm just taking my brush and I'm brushing over the top of the circle with the gator hide on, making sure everything is sealed in nicely. And I'm also going to use the gator hide to seal the entire plate. So I'm going to add that to the outside rim of the plate as well. And so I'm going to continue to work on and decoupage the rice paper on all three of the plates and sealing the plates in with my gator hide. My plates have all dried from the decoupage of the Holiday Holly rice paper on the centers, and now I'm going to do some more decoupaging, and I'm going to be using some images from the Wreaths and Wishes rice paper that you see here, and I'm just cutting out 3 of the images that I want to use for each of the plates. Once I get my images cut out, then I'm going to use the water method, which is taking my paintbrush and some water, and I'm going to go around the outside of my images on the rice paper. I want that rough look to the edges that using the water method does for the rice paper. I didn't want straight edges that a scissors would do. So I'm just going to go around all 3 of my images with the water method, getting them nice and cut out and ready to apply to my plates. So I'm going to use my gator hide again to decoupage these pieces of rice paper onto the plates, just like I did before. I'm going to put a layer of the gator hide down, lay my piece of rice paper down, and then just go over the top with the gator hide. So because I sealed these with gator hide, you can completely stop here and your project is done. But I wanted to make these plates look a little bit more vintage and worn. And so I'm going to take some Sweet Pickins dark beeswax and really kind of highlight the inside circle of the plates. I'm going to apply it with a brush and then buff it back with a paper towel. I'm also going to apply a little bit of the beeswax around the outside edge of the plate over the truffle, just to make sure everything blends in. And so I'm just going to keep applying the wax on the inside circle of these plates, really highlighting that area and making it look a little bit more vintage and worn. I think these plates turned out so cute. You could display them so many different ways. You could display them standing up, you could hang them on a wall, or you could use them as a cute Christmas coaster. Let me know in the comments what you think. Project number 3 is this peace sign, and I think it's something that probably originally came from Hobby Lobby, but it has some nice silver glitter on the outside edges of the letters, and so I thought I would dress it up for the holidays. So I'm going to start out by painting the top of the peace sign, just the letters, in 2 coats of Dixie Belle Hurricane Gray chalk paint. So my paint is completely dry, and now I'm going to be stamping on top of the peace sign. And I'm going to be using the IOD Waltz stamp. And I'm also going to be using, instead of regular ink, I'm going to be using the clear embossing ink as well as some white embossing powder. And I will leave the links to the embossing powder and the embossing ink in my description box below. And so I have my stamp already on my thin mount, and I'm taking my clear embossing ink and I'm inking up that stamp. Then I'm going to take my stamp and I'm going to start at the top of the peace sign, lay my stamp down, hold it in place with one hand while I use my other hand to press that stamp down to make sure that I'm getting a good amount of ink on my peace sign. And then I'm going to ink up my stamp once again and finish off stamping the peace sign. Once I get the clear embossing ink completely stamped onto my peace sign, then I'm going to take my white embossing powder and I'm going to sprinkle it all over the peace sign where I've inked it. And once I get it sprinkled all over the top, then I'm going to tip up the peace sign and let that excess embossing powder fall onto a piece of parchment paper. And the embossing powder is only going to stick where I have the embossing ink. And now I'm just going to take my parchment paper and kind of fold it up and put that embossing powder back in my container. And now I am going to take my heat gun and go over the top of the embossing powder. You can't use a blow dryer for this step. You have to use a heat gun. And when you apply the heat from the heat gun to your embossing powder, it gives it a nice, beautiful, bright, shiny look. And you can kind of see that embossing powder changing look as I'm going over it with the heat gun. I'm going to finish up by applying one even coat of my Dixie Belle Satin Clear Coat to the entire top of my peace sign, sealing in the chalk paint and the embossing powder. And then this project is complete. I think this peace sign turned out so cute. It would make a great accent piece to your holiday decor, and I really like the way it looks nestled in some greenery. Let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope I've inspired you as we get ready for the upcoming holiday season. All the products that I used in today's projects are available on my website at thevintagehenandchick.com or in my Amazon store, and I will leave the links for everything in the description box below. I'll be back next week with another fun video, so I'll see you then.